Welcome to Tech Talks. I'm Holly Scott. Today I have the pleasure of having with me Marissa Fayer. Marissa is the CEO of Deep Look Medical and Her Health EQ. Thanks for joining us today, Marissa.
Thanks for having me.
No, it's great to have you and chat a little bit about your very unique and very interesting career, engineer, entrepreneur, all focused generally in women's health. So I thought this would be a fascinating discussion, and we really appreciate you making time. So let's start with, if we can, some general jargon, some general language, because there's terms that are thrown around. So for context, women's health and femtech, from where you sit, could you give us some color on what those mean so that we are speaking the same language today?
For sure. So women's health is the health of an entire woman. So it could be obviously the so-called bikini areas that we talk about, but it's also cardiovascular health or anything that affects women differently or disproportionately. So autoimmune diseases, heart attacks affect women differently. So anything, but really women's health is an entire body health. And so that's really what it is. And in reality, we shouldn't even be calling it women's health. It should just be called health. So that's one side. When we talk about femtech, we needed to give the area a discussion, a topic and a name. So decided on femtech, like, computer tech, age tech, IoT, any of those things, called it femtech to really just say, hey, it's focused on women. The thought is that it's actually too narrow right now. And so a lot of people are working to kind of broaden that out. So it's femtech is any tech, anything. It could be on your phone, it could be a wearable, it could be anything, any healthcare that's affecting a woman and affects women's health. So they're really just names and jargons dealing with anything having to do with women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's. I was fortunate to be in panel discussion in that Impact Symposium with you at Mass Medic a couple of weeks ago, and I walked away really stung by some data associated with women's health. As someone who I consider myself, fairly astute on what's going on in the market, and I also consider myself a woman who's been in healthcare my entire life, and to walk away and hear the gap in the market, especially like R&D expenditure, some of the areas. What was that stat? In terms of the women's health spend annually, and where women's health has actually been focused.
Yeah, so the R&D spend related to women's health is only at 4%, and if you take out oncology, it's actually only 2%. So all global R&D spend that's focused specifically on women, between 2 and 4%. I mean, how are we going to change women's health if we're not investing in R&D to change our healthcare? Mm-hmm. When in general, for the last 100 years, women weren't thought of as almost as having different genetics or different biology. And so it's never, things weren't even tested on women. They weren't designed for women. They weren't designed by women. And so the fact of the matter is, between 2 and 4% of all R&D goes specifically to women's health when we're 51% of the population. So in reality, we're the majority of the population. Mm-hmm. And so hence we all feel that there needs to be a lot more spend, maybe 50%, 51% of all R&D should actually be going to focus on women's health issues.
Mm-hmm. And there's also the reality that women are in general, and there's a few publications I've seen this in, where we make the health decisions in the family, right? So we're
80%.
Yeah,
80% of all health decisions are made by women.
Yeah. So we're making the health decisions, yet we're still pretty far behind. And we talk about the bikini area, okay? And we talk about breast cancer. We talk about fertility issues. Those are the areas that we generally hear about and we've heard about for decades. There are, though, health concerns that affect us differently. And you touched on that, but I think that's so important. Cardiovascular health, what else?
So cardiovascular health, diabetes, Alzheimer's and dementia, mental health, areas that only women are being affected by, endometriosis, PCOS. I mean, all of these types of things. Women present differently when they're having a heart attack or when they have stomach issues, or so literally everything, how we react to drugs, how we react to treatments, how we potentially react to oncology and cancer treatment might be different, in therapeutics. So it's everything. Startling.
Huge, enormous unmet needs out there to tackle, you know, and I'm encouraged. I have seen in the last few years investment ticking up in this space and a lot more attention being paid. So
Yes.
that is encouraging. So, so what brought you here? Maybe we could get back to basics so we understand your road. You have an interesting history, you know, starting in engineering. What, can you share a little light, first of all, on your upbringing? You know, what brought you to where you are today, to going into engineering and then being entrepreneurial? If you reflect on your life and your past, are there pieces that you think gave you this foundation and these particular motivations?
For sure. I was a space nerd as a kid. I mean, I grew up in the Sally Ride era, and I wanted to be an astronaut, and I went to space camp and academies, and thank God my parents really supported that. I went to school for aerospace engineering. That's what I started with. And you know, I was going into the space program, and quite honestly, if I had perfect vision, you know, that would have been my pathway. They didn't accept lenses back then, and now they do, but you know, I aged out. And quite honestly, I just kept going down that pathway. And then I was interning at a company in the space industry, and it took a downfall because they didn't win a contract. And I just thought to myself, that's not really the industry and life that I want to live. And so thankfully, I switched over to manufacturing engineering at that point, and I was recruited into a healthcare company. And I didn't know, like I didn't. And I was always interested in science and math. I went for an engineering degree. I was recruited into a healthcare company. And, you know, once, I think everybody who's listening to this knows, like almost once you're in healthcare, you never leave. I always was really creative and explorative. And I wanted to make sure that I was like exploring different things and learning. And I think in healthcare, I was able to do that. I also fell into women's health. I was always, as a woman engineer, I was always really, you know, passionate about STEM and making sure that women and girls had access to education. But I was recruited into the largest women's health company in the world. And so I was grateful for that. I didn't seek it out, but then I realized that was me. That was my mission. And that's where I really just found the passion and how I started moving forward in the women's health space.
Wow, that's it is interesting. Once people get into healthcare, whatever area they serve, they rarely leave. There are many instances now, especially in the last 10 years, where we've had the privilege of bringing people from other markets, especially with the influx of tech, you know, chatting with people in software engineering that are working on a gaming app and showing them how exciting it can be to actually impact someone's life and, you know, making such a big difference. So I could see why that would be quite a different turn and a lot of exposure for you. So you were in manufacturing women's health and started to understand that was a market you enjoyed. Where did you start getting that entrepreneurial bug? Because now here you are, CEO of two different efforts, not just one, two. There are how many hours in your day? 48 or 24?
Same as everybody. I just don't sleep as much.
You just don't sleep as much. So where did you get the entrepreneurial bug? What was the catalyst there?
Yeah, I think I had it all along, but I didn't know what it was. So I was always kind of, you know, fighting the norm and wanting to make more change and not conforming so much to the normal corporate mindset. And I didn't know it until I left. I didn't know until, you know, I was part of I took a downsizing and took a restructure. And it was after I was out of the country also for 4 years. So I didn't know. I had no idea. And first of all, I had no idea what entrepreneurs did, because years ago, it wasn't glorified. Mm-hmm. I don't know why it's glorified now, because it's actually harder than any other corporate job. So, you know, anybody thinking about it, maybe not so much. But I would say I probably had it all along, and I didn't know until I had the opportunity to step out of corporate and really decided and realized that I was an entrepreneur, because I like to build and grow things. And when they get stable and static is when I personally just get bored. So from my perspective, that's kind of always the change, that like I need to keep switching, to different things. I also always want to change and make a difference and impact. And entrepreneurs can do that at an early stage, and some of them can do it at a later stage. It just depends, I think, on skill set and what you like. I like it at an earlier stage. Some people love it at a later stage. That's just not what I prefer. So honestly, like I fell into it, and not on purpose. I was almost more or less forced into it. And thank God I had those skills, because otherwise I would have gone back to corporate. And listen, it's not to say I'm not going to go back to corporate, and it's not just, but I'll do it in a different way, where now, 15 years later, it's a different world. It's a different mindset in corporate that encourages entrepreneurs. Years ago, that was never the thing. And now it's recognized, and now it's actually, people seek out entrepreneurs to bring them back in.
So true. It's so true. And now you are a different person than you were, 15
Completely.
years ago too. I want to pick on this point in particular because I think it could shed some valuable light to many, many others. We saw a stat recently where like 29,000 people in the medtech industry have been impacted by layoffs this year, okay? 29,000. Now, most of those, most heavily, are the big corporations that have done some squeezing. So did I hear you correctly that you were in a different country and let know that you were being reorganized or restructured after 4 years of being with the company? Is that right?
I was 9 years with the company. I was 4 years out of the country. I knew it. I chose it.
Okay.
I knew I could have come back to the U.S., and I did come back to the U.S., but I made a choice. I made a choice. Things were changing in the organization. It was time for me to leave. And but it was happening at that time, and it was time for me to go. So, I was, of course, upset about it. But there's silver linings, and I'm not going to say every time it's a silver lining, because that's just, we all know that's not the case. I was very lucky. I worked very hard to make it work. So while I do admit, I'm sure that there was some luck in it, but I worked incredibly hard, and I took several years to really start and build up my business. So it's not easy, especially starting as an entrepreneur. And I think it is now. And there's more avenues for entrepreneurs and more opportunities. But I made a choice because I knew something was needed to change. Also in me, I changed. I was out of the country. I was different. I, wanted to do something new. And I think that's where the entrepreneurial mindset, kind of came in, where I didn't know what that was. And I made a choice, and thankfully it was the right decision. I hope. And I think there's opportunity when these companies make these changes. And again, we all know, and Holly, this, like it's cyclical. Like, this is the cycle that happens every 8 to 10 years in the med device industry. All the companies, they get too big, they splinter off, they do, they have the layoffs. A lot of these smaller companies kind of, the small divisions create their own companies. This is where all the small tech companies actually do incredibly well, because they're all ripe for acquisition. They get incorporated into the big companies, they grow again every 8 to 10 years. This is the cycle. And it's unfortunate that it's happening now. But there are so many opportunities and so many companies also looking for incredible talent. And it's not just the big companies, the medium-sized companies. We're in a different market than we were the last time this happened. All of these different, mid-sized companies, they weren't in existence. They were tiny, tiny startups with 4 people. Now they're hundreds and thousands of people, and they're growing. They're the companies that are incredibly growing. And there's opportunity for people who are in these large corporations to make the transition over to them.
100%. You know, you're speaking to exactly what we've seen, and although painful, as we don't want to minimize how
For sure.
how it is to go through these transitions and how it feels, especially if you've been with an organization for some period of time, and you know you really are proud of the work you do. You take ownership, and it's hard not to take it personally. However, I have seen so many individuals pivot into opportunities, and a few years down the road, not a few minutes, but a few years down the road, they look back and say, oh my gosh, Holly, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. I had no idea what I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know what I hadn't learned. I didn't know what hadn't been exposed to.
And you can't see it when you're in it. And that's
right.
the thing.
That's
and
right.
It's only with hindsight did I recognize that that was a good thing. I was so upset when it was, when it was happening, and when I made the decision as well. So, I mean, it's hindsight. There are opportunities, like there are, and this is where also the value of having incredible networks and incredible companies to help, they're available.
That's right.
And they need to be utilized.
That's right. That's right. We have never been in a better position for the individual to be empowered to manage their own career development. There has never been a better time. You know, you've got the public access of LinkedIn where anyone can be found. You've got communities that support entrepreneurs. You've got tools that allow you to see every new young company that's popping up if you love women's health or cardiology or orthopedics or whatever it might be. So yeah, there's lots of opportunity. So that's great, and I appreciate you sharing that experience, because again, I believe a lot of individuals out there, and some that I've spoken with even this week on the phone, can relate to those types of crosses in the road where you're really starting to evaluate what's next, and it doesn't always look and smell like where you've been the last few years.
And it shouldn't, actually. This is the time to do something different, which you can find out that you love it or you find out that you hate it. But at least you find out something, and then you'll know to make a better decision or a different decision the next round. But you can learn something from this, and making a pivot might be a great idea.
That's right.
And you might love it.
That's
I mean,
right.
you never know.
That's right. And you become a more powerful leader down the road. There's no question about it. You know, Marissa is a stronger leader based on the fact that you've been inside the walls and understand the mechanics of a big strategic, and you also now have, the thick skin from being a serial entrepreneur and startup leader. So those pieces, they're not for everyone, and people can have wonderful careers in one or the other. If you are, though, interested in getting that cross-pollination and that exposure, it can benefit you dramatically wherever you land downrange.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, I know we talk career, but let's talk tech. So you have been in a very interesting area, specifically in the market with both your organizations. So start where you'd like, but I'd love to hear more about what is special about Deep Look as well as Her Health EQ.
Yeah, so I'll start with Her Health EQ. It's a global nonprofit focused on women's health in developing countries. And what we do is we deploy medical equipment, sometimes new, sometimes used, from our medical device community, from our hospitals, and get it to the places that need it most. No developing country cares if there's a scratch on it, if the color is blue versus green. It doesn't matter. They need an ultrasound machine. They need an EKG machine. They need mammography. These are pieces of equipment that are necessary. And so I created the organization after an idea working out of the country at a large, at one of the large companies. And it fits a niche, it fits a need. And I love the work that we do. We've deployed 32 pieces of equipment already, and we're growing and scaling to about at least another 150 more in the next 2 years. And so impacting women on a global scale is something incredibly important, and something that we have to remind ourselves that we just don't live in the United States. This is a global world now, and there's other people that have a need for access to equipment. So that's my love and my passion work for sure. Deep Look, I am proud to be the CEO of, and we are a technology company that is revolutionizing oncology and imaging specifically. And our first focus really is breast cancer. We're a commercial stage FDA cleared technology. And we're excited to be, commercializing right now with some of our large commercial partners. We can visualize soft tumor masses across the entire imaging suite, mammography, ultrasound, CT, MR, and for all health conditions, because I've been in women's health, and honestly, breast cancer is always a hot topic, and it's also the only annual repeatable imaging screen that happens for women. And so the market is quite large. And so that's why we decided first and foremost to launch in there, but we're applicable and used in so many other places as well. And so I took this over from founders. They actually brought me in, they're still involved, and it's a really exciting time for us because we're one of the great technologies that are FDA cleared. We have an incredible pipeline of new and add-on technologies as well. And we're direct into the workflow, which makes it easy for adoption. And I think that's where a lot of technology companies, they falter and think that, physicians are going to, want to click on 17 more screens because they don't have anything else to do. And so making sure that's easy for them, I think is, that's the way, I feel and we feel is the way to get best adoption. So I'm proud to lead that company.
That's an interesting approach. What's unique about the imaging properties? What are we able to gather with this technology that wasn't available prior?
Yeah, so using actually pattern recognition and shape recognition, we're able to see inside dense tissue because we're reading like the math in each individual pixel. So we can see inside dense tissue, specifically dense breasts, lung, liver, and it layers straight directly on top of an existing image. There's no sending it off to the cloud and getting some images back and getting things back. There's no additional screens. So that's the interesting technology behind it. And we're able to just see more than a human can see. Listen, we're humans, so we're doctors, so we're radiologists. They have the same human eyes that we all do, while they're better trained and they have a better visual acuity. Quite honestly, they're still human. And so a computer is able to see more. And so we're not decision support yet, but we are a visual aid and a visual tool to help them see more than they can with their naked eye. We also are like a workflow tool because we one-click measure and segment, which is really interesting because if you can't see the edges, how are you supposed to define them? And if you can't define the edges, how are you supposed to measure the mass? So we do that all in one click because, again, we're just reading gradients of gray.
Is it hardware agnostic or does it have a hardware component?
It is hardware agnostic completely.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
So you're not
it layers
looking
onto any image capture.
Okay. So it's working with existing mammography systems in already placed in clinics, imaging centers, hospitals, wherever they may be.
Yeah, mammography, ultrasound, CT, MR, it can be used on any soft tumor mass in the entire body.
Okay. So with the first indication being breast, in terms of the commercialization properties of that, is it a staged approach? Do you go after the mammography centers first and then start with the other CTs? And my curiosity about that plan is why I'm asking.
Yeah, for sure. So we're actually cleared across everything. We just made the decision to go to breast because it's the largest market. It's also the hardest one, quite honestly, and not technologically. It's because there's so many factors related to it. So we decided to go to breast, and yeah, we're breast mammography. We can be used on the static images from an ultrasound, from an MR, yeah, quite honestly, even a biopsy cavity. Which is quite interesting to making sure potentially margins are clear. And so, what we do is we don't go direct to hospitals. We integrate with the software companies, the OEMs, and the PACS systems, and also the monitors. We have a partnership with Barco, who owns 90% of the medical monitor for mammography. And so we've partnered with them. And so we're integrated directly into the monitors, into one of their software tools that's used every day.
Fascinating. So that's what you mean by layer on. You really
Yeah.
can be compatible with all of these existing programs, and you have the right partnerships.
Yeah.
Wow, that's exciting. That's exciting. And does it take any more time? And you talk about the workflow. Is it basically instantaneous? As soon as you click the button, you get the results?
As soon as you click the button, you get the results, and you actually don't have to, like, drag your mouse on the screen. And it could be turned on and turned off whenever anybody wants. And so it's depending on which button you click, it's you click it on, you click it off, and you could use it, you don't have to use it. And that's the benefit. We don't want something that's on all the time and that's, that's annoying to physicians. So use it when you want it, turn it off when you don't.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
So that has tremendous potential. And that's a global drive right now in terms of your focus?
It is. We're cleared here in the States. We're going after UK approval, and we will be going after CE mark soon. Just trying to get into the timeline for CE. It's quite long right now.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, it sounds like you staged it appropriately given the global climate for commercialization,
sure.
Regulatory and such. So very, very interesting. So that the deep look focus, I can appreciate that. And then, getting back to Her Health, I'm curious on the, do you have strategic partnerships? I would imagine that strategic partners would want to be involved with this democratization that you're going after for access to healthcare. Do you have any? Are you working to secure corporate partners in that way?
We're still working to secure more corporate partners. So we would love to partner, with the medical device communities, the OEMs, the resellers, also hospital systems. And we're always looking for new partners, because the more equipment that we have, the more people that we can, and more women that we can impact around the world. And that's incredibly important to us. So we do have a great partnership with Lutech Industries for cervical cancer detection. We do have support from Hologic for a program that we just launched in Costa Rica. We have other corporate partners, but we're always looking for more. And we want partners that both on the equipment side, but also that align with what we do. And on a CSR, corporate social responsibility, and an impact side, want to align and let us do the hard work for you, take the credit for it, support, our work. And I really believe, especially in the medical device industry, we should be giving back to the communities in which we're working in. So as we are, sourcing from all over the world, we should be giving back to the communities in which we are impacting and we're working in. And so that was one of the tenets of how I founded the company, is to make sure that we were doing that. Obviously, our scope and scale has expanded beyond that, but I think it's really important because it's a really good goodwill for a community, for a medical device company, for an OEM, for a supplier, to support programs like this. For them financially, it doesn't mean much, or, from a piece of equipment, it doesn't mean much, but for the community and the impact and the optics and the PR associated with it, it means a lot. And it means a lot to every single woman who is impacted by that. I mean, we've impacted hundreds of thousands of women or tens of thousands of women, and we're striving for over 1 million. I mean, there needs to be more democratization of these pieces of equipment, because women need it. And it's not for not wanting to get screened. It's just not having access to the proper equipment to either screen, prevent, or treat non-communicable diseases that affect women. And so, we focus on cancers that affect women. So cervical cancer, breast cancer, and potentially other cancers, skin cancer, sometimes other types, heart disease, and maternal health, which is still a massive problem around the world, even here in the United States. And these are things that with equipment can easily be either treated, prevented, or diagnosed. Like it's not a really hard concept to grasp. It's more, we want more partners, back to your original question. Yes, we're always looking for partners. So if anybody's interested, I'd be more than willing to speak to them.
Yeah, no, big call to action there, especially from, there's been big initiatives in organizations, the big companies, and we all know who they are. We would love to see some more action in the women's health space, and especially with a nonprofit like this that can create avenues for additional service to human health, not just women's health, but human health. These devices that are either not being used, or like you said, are just overlooked, or supporting financially, or supporting with supply chain. There are ways that you can get involved and encourage that. So if anyone who's listening has any ties, make sure you reach out to Marissa that might be able to make some things happen, because it's for the good of all of us. Look, I say it all the time, it takes a village, and this industry is one where this is why we do what we do. Yes, our business is search, but we lift the industry because the industry moves forward. We all move forward. Human health moves forward. That's what this is all about. So we appreciate that you did this, that you took on this endeavor. In addition to the job that pays you too, right?
Yeah,
in your 48 hours a day.
Of course. And listen, like, we never know what girl in wherever country is going to, cure cancer, or have the next Nobel Peace Prize, or, write that most incredible book, or whatever. The problem is, girls are being pulled out of school because their mothers, their aunts, their grandmothers, or sisters are sick or dead. And it's the girls get pulled out first before the boys do. And that's not fair. And as someone who is an educated woman in the STEM industry, I can't fix the education system. I'm not in education. I can't fix that. This is a healthcare problem. And to make sure that those mothers and grandmothers and aunts and sisters, they're healthy, so that that girl can go to school, she can get an education, she can get a job, and she is the one potentially who's going to change our world for the better. And that's what I want to make sure happens. Because again, I'm not an educator, and I come from an educator family. I value that, but that I can't change that.
That's right.
We have to make sure everyone's healthy so that they can go to school.
Got to use your superhero powers for good. And that's exactly what you're doing, Marissa. So if you were to envision progress, 5 years out in your world, what are some of the qualities of that world? How would you like to have made this impact?
Well, I hope with our LTQ, we've impacted in 5 years, hopefully 1.5, 2 million women. So that would be incredible. I also would imagine that, Deep Look will have been sold. So that'll be great. The technology will be even larger with a bigger company. I envision that the stats from R&D are no longer at 4%. I mean, I would like them to be at 50% in 5 years, but let's just be realistic. Maybe they're at 10%, which is a huge step. I would also like investment in women's health to grow from the meager 1 to 2% of the investment space to, again, I'd be thrilled with 10% in 5 years. And I think we have to remember that any investment, any R&D in women's health is just, as you said, Holly, it's investment in health, and it's human. And that's the way we need to think about it. And we're investing in society. And like in 5 years, that's what I would like to see. And I would love to be super optimistic and say we're going to be at 50-50 parity. And that's not going to happen in 5 years. But we need to continue to take these large incremental steps to get there, so that hopefully in 20, 30 years, we're even closer.
I'm with you. So when we have our podcast in 2027, we'll look back on these and really look at it in 2028 and say, where are we and what are we doing and how have we made progress? What are our grades compared? So
I hope it changes. I really do, because it hasn't changed in the last few years, and it's frustrating.
Yeah. Well, we're forward thinking. You're putting a lot of momentum behind two incredible efforts that can have huge impact. And this has been a great conversation. I sincerely appreciate not only the work you do, but the time you're spending with us and with the audience sharing today. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And for all of us out there, all of you out there listening, thanks for joining us on Tech Talks. We'll see you next time.